On today's Mattcast, I speak with Edwin, the magic engineer, who runs a channel with open boosters called Unhinged Magi. I've been watching his content for over 4 years, and I was more than happy to have him on as a guest as we chat inflation versus deflation, investing, Magic the Gathering cards, and the collectible market as a whole. And it's coming up next. I guess if you saw the suggested topics that I sent you.
Oh yeah, I hadn't even looked at them for so long. But you know what? I'm fine with just like winging it as if I hadn't even seen them. I don't even remember.
Yeah, that's fine too. That's why I just asked if there's anything else you want to add on. I thought it was interesting when you talked about inflation versus deflation, because I have that argument with so many of my friends right now, especially with how crazy the world is.
Yeah, you know, I think the quick answer on that one, my perspective, is that they're both happening. There's various things causing inflation, and there's other things causing deflation, and they're literally battling themselves right now. And there is a question on which one is going to win at the end, and I do have one that I think is going to win. But I think the important thing to recognize is that there is aspects of both of those happening at the same time.
So do you think it's a bit of a stagflation then?
I think it'll stagflate until one of them gets larger. And the one I personally suspect to get larger is going to be the inflationary side. Because in order to go into a deflation, what you need to have is a country of responsible leaders that effectively care about where that country is going. Kind of like in your household, if you see that you have a spending problem and you need to get it under control, then you start living within your means, and then you start not spending quite as much and stuff like that. And for a while, it sucks. It's not enjoyable. But that's a process you have to go through. But the reason why you do it is you look down the road and you say, we can't go broke. You know, it matters to me where we're at. And America right now has a system where the politicians that are in office have been given all kinds of reasons not to care where it goes long term, where America goes long term. And we're even incentivizing them to only focus on the short term. They get lots of benefits from it. And so this whole thing about doing the right thing, living within your means, paying down the debt, not inflating the US dollar, those days are gone, because any politician that goes for something like that, doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat, they're not getting voted into office. And even if they did, say they got voted into office and then they start saying, it's like we have to go on a diet, right? Diets aren't fun. Like, you know, if we're going to raise the inflation rate up to like 18%, like Paul Volcker did in the 1980s, which would counteract a lot of the inflationary money expansion that they've done, it would counteract that, but it would annihilate the stock market.
Yeah, I was just
going to annihilate the housing market. Everybody would blame that politician because they'd be like, okay, look what happened here. Bob got into office and then he raised the inflation rate and everybody lost money. And isn't it terrible? Now you should vote for my candidate. And your average American has no idea about how these things work. And all that they would see is Bob got into office and everything crashed. And so nobody would vote for that party. And both sides know that. And that is the literal reason why it doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat in the seat. They're going to keep printing money. They're going to expand the national debt. And so it's clear to me, it's been clear for a while now, that inflation is going to be where it lands eventually.
Yeah. It's funny because you'd think it would be deflation. Well, it would have been deflation if they didn't print money, because deflation. When they locked everything down, you know, there's no productivity that should lead to deflation like the Depression, but instead it led to hyperinflation. Well, hopefully not yet.
A really good and protruded deflation would hurt like hell, but it would be the exact thing that needs to happen in order for America as an entity to come out the other side and actually work.
It would strengthen the dollar too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it's exactly analogous to eating and like going on a diet. If you don't want to like die a 500-pound fat man, like, you know, completely stuck on diabetes and all these other issues, it's going to suck for a while. You know, you're going to have to not eat. You're going to have to exercise for a while. It's going to be not fun. So it's a process like that. We need a deflation. They need to take their mitts out of the free market and let the interest rate be discovered by price discovery.
Yeah.
They need to stop printing money. They need to stop manipulating. And if they do that, those guys, they all know it would cause a crash.
Yeah.
And you notice that the Republicans don't call out the Democrats too much, and the Democrats don't call out the Republicans too much. They just keep kind of like running that thing up. And so we need a deflation, but they're never going to let it happen.
It's just never going to. Well, it really depends. Right now, I think it's pretty much been baby boomers in office for the last 20 something years. But once I think millennials get into office, I don't know if they're going to want to kick the can down the road as much. I feel like there's going to be maybe a shift in currency. I don't know if the US dollar is going to be the world's reserve currency at that point, sadly.
We're definitely going to lose reserve currency status. I definitely foresee that happening. But I think here's what it comes down to. Like if it's ever going to change, and we're either going to have an inflationary, crack up boom effectively because the politicians are spineless. But if we ever go into a deflationary collapse because someone's doing the right thing, it would require, this is the key, it would require the general population of America to understand why they need to go on a diet. They would need to understand that it's intentional that they're walking into something that sucks because they want the country to not collapse. And until the average American understands that, then no politician will stomach it because the public won't stomach it. And that's the problem. That's the key, right? Because the average American, even like people that consider themselves financially knowledgeable, they don't understand, man. They don't get it. They've never studied monetary history. They don't know what it means to have a fiat currency. They don't understand the real laws of supply and demand. They don't understand what happens when a national debt massively expands and a government hits the point where they can no longer borrow into the future. They don't get that. And if they don't get that, then they don't get why they need to change. So the only possibility to do what you just said and have a future generation that's willing to do the right thing absolutely unequivocally requires that they understand why they need to go on a financial diet. Yeah. And if they're not figuring that out, if you don't see the newer generations now getting that in their head, then it's never going to happen.
Yeah. And I think Robert Kiyosaki was one of the ones who mentioned that the great deflation that would heal the world.
It would suck like crazy, but it would heal the world. Right. Because I mean, everybody thinks that like, that the growth is what you always need, right? Growth is something that can kill an organism unto itself. Growth sometimes is exactly what you don't need. Sometimes a little bit of shrinking is exactly what you need. If you look at like any kind of like biological entity that grows past its environment's ability to create resources, that entity can basically extinct itself. And that can happen like anywhere, right? So there eventually needs to be a balance. Like what is the food production rate? What is the energy production rate? What is, any of these rates? Like what is the pollution rate that can be created versus like falls out of the air and eventually gets consumed? These things have to hit some kind of balance equilibrium. And there's only so much that the world can support in any one of those categories. And if you don't support that, then you're going to have a system that spins out of control and you're going to have things that like blow off the side. And what we have right now is we have a world history of exponential population growth, exponential energy usage, exponential consumption, right? And all these things, like you cannot have exponential growth in a finite world. I know that one sentence sums it up, but that's it. And when you think about it, it makes sense, right? If you live in a house that goes up by 100 watts or 3% power every single year, then at some point you're going to exceed the grid's ability to provide power to your house. You cannot have exponential growth in a finite world. It doesn't work. At some point, things start just blowing apart. And
do you think lumber prices right now are an indication of that?
Oh yeah, I think inflation finds its way in many ways. it's, I don't, are we recording right now, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I jumped right. I was gonna do an intro, but like we got so like right away we started hitting gears, and I was like, let's just go with it.
Intro.
Yeah.
Inflation is a really interesting thing. People have these concepts. Like when you watch a movie and there's a villain, and the villain has like dark eye makeup, and he has like a long mustache, and he spins his mustache, and he laughs evilly, and you're like, that's the bad guy, right? You know what? Real life doesn't work like that. Oftentimes in real life, the person who's doing the most damage, or group that's doing the most damage, is oftentimes the ones that think that they're doing good for the world. They believe in the thing that they're doing, but it has lots of side impact and damage. And I mention this because it's not what everybody thinks is the key, right? And when you talk about inflation, people get this idea in their head that when inflation goes up, number one, they think it means the CPI is going to go up, and that thing is a total lie. It's
the price index. Oh yeah, that's all.
Yeah, total lie. Yeah. So everybody has this idea in their head, like, Big Macs are going to go up at the same rate as lumber goes up, at the same rate as concrete. And my life experience with actual inflation, real honest inflation, it doesn't work like that. What happens with inflation is you have a larger amount of currency that's created, and the currency is in the hands of specific people or groups. And those people and those groups care about some things more than others. And the things that the people that hold the money care about is the things that are going to be receiving that money. And so those markets start to balloon and expand and grow. And then the people that are the recipients of that money, that kind of tertiary kind of receiving group, then they begin to spend the money. And now it becomes things that they actually care about. And if we were going to relate this to something like Magic the Gathering, and say you got 10 rich people in a room, and they all want to start buying Magic the Gathering cards, and they think that all Magic is going to go up, well, they're going to run out and buy like Zendikar Rising commons? No, man. No, they're going to go buy alpha beta. They're going to go buy, reserve list cards. They're going to go buy the high end graded. And then at some point, all these reserve list cards have gone up in value, and that's like your primary tier. And then they're going to start looking around at other things and saying like, okay, well, these ones aren't like BGS graded, but they're still alpha beta. So then those start going up. And then the next thing you look around and, well, these ones aren't even reserve list, but they're original print, they're Arabian Nights and stuff. So they start going up. And so what you see, this is kind of where I'm tying it back. People think inflation works a certain way. What I'm saying is it doesn't work like that. Inflation works by the money coming into different areas, and it kind of waterfalls down, right? And then eventually, once that money that's been created makes its way all the way down into the lowest rungs of the economy, that's when everything starts to eventually come up. But the inflation has been going on for a while. And so after that analogy, now let's echo back to the world. House prices skyrocketing, Bitcoin skyrocketing. Precious metals have been artificially manipulated down.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but collectibles are going up like crazy, right? Artwork is going up like crazy, like rare artwork, very old collectible cars. If you start looking and asking yourself the question, what are the things that people that have lots of money and power want to buy first?
Real estate.
Those are the things that are going up. And then eventually that money that's been created is going to start to come out. And if you look at it in another way, like imagine you have like 3 bankers sitting in a room, right? And the bankers, they all have because when they printed all this money, the bailouts and stuff, the initial bailouts didn't go to the average public. It went to like the banking system and corporations and things like that. Governments, they were the recipients of all this.
Too big to fail.
Yeah. They were the ones. It's not the general. You and I didn't get that 800 billion that came out in 2008 with the bailout. It was like the banks that got it, right? Okay, so just keep this in your mind. You're a banker. You're sitting on these enormous amounts of money. You have access to huge liquidity, right? And now what happens when you start seeing inflation kick up and the things that you want to buy are going up? Now, if you sit there and leave this money in your vault, the purchasing power of the money starts going away really fast. And so the bankers hold the money until the inflation starts to show its ugly head, and then they just get rid of it as fast as
start getting rid of it. Yeah.
And so, and that there's a psychological moment where that trips. And that's a really important point for people to understand, because people have been asking this question. All this money got printed and we don't see the inflation yet. No, you guys. You're not going to see any inflation until the money that got printed comes out of these bank vaults, comes out of these governments and these corporations, and makes its way into the economy. That's when you see the inflation. And if you're the banker and you're holding this money and the inflation is near zero, or maybe there's even slight deflation, you're not going to want to get rid of it, because money can buy anything. But if inflation starts and it shows its ugly head, now you're going to get rid of it. And it's one of those things, it's like throwing a match on a huge pile of kindling that's covered in gasoline, right? Because like once one of them starts going, then the other one gets rid of his currency, then the next one gets rid of his currency, and then bam, you've got massive inflation. And so a lot of economists basically think that once the Fed thinks they're going to let inflation run hot.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
And then once it runs hot a little bit, then, oh, hey, we'll do these things and we'll control it like they always have. I and many others believe that's not going to work like that, because the traditional ways that they had to temper the inflation was to start dropping
interest rates. We're raising interest rates, right?
Yeah. So start raising interest rates. But the raising of interest rates now will completely collapse the markets. They can't handle it.
You saw just a small spike in interest rates earlier. What is it? Last month in February, and my stock portfolio went down 30%.
Yeah, and
for a long time too. I was like 6 weeks.
Yeah, so I think that the main people controlling the hedge fund managers and stuff in the stock market, I think they totally understand this game, and they know as long as the Fed is willing to print and not raise rates, then it's like the game continues on, and you can keep investing in the markets and let the markets keep running up. But they're listening. And if they hear Jerome Powell or anyone else come out and be like, you know what, guys, we're going to have to start raising the federal funds rate. And, we're going to stop this whole bond buying program, Operation Twist and all this stuff that starts like, controlling like the interest rate in the bond market. When they start letting that go, then I mean, that's where the inflation is going to kick up. That's when the markets drop. That's when things get out. But right now you've got central bankers and a very accommodative government being like, it's fine. It's fine. We're going to print money. Look, here's more free money. Here's another stimulus program. Like if you look at the VIX right now, which is supposed to track volatility, it's like the lowest it's like ever been, like ever. And it's been going like straight down very unnaturally by the way.
Yeah, doesn't even make
sense.
The
VIX is supposed to be doing this. That's the whole point of the VIX. But the VIX is just on this slow downward trend, right? And it's not doing anything else. It's very predictable, just slowly dropping, and it's already completely past its 50-day moving average, its 200-day moving average, super low, right? It's like everybody's just like asleep at the wheel and just letting the algorithms run, because the banks and the government are all out there being like, yeah, we're totally going to stimulate. We're totally going to print. We're not going to raise rates. It's all fine, right? And that's the name of the game right now.
Also, because the economy isn't fully open, that could be one of the reasons that's actually keeping the CPI, the consumer price index on daily necessities like food, down so much, because things are locked down, like travel. You can't really do that right now. So once things actually fully open back up, that's when you can see hyperinflation is what some people are saying.
The term there is the velocity of currency. As soon as like all that money that's sitting on the sidelines starts to circulate around the economy, and the velocity.
Or you can pull it out of the stocks, right? Like people have made the craziest returns from March 2020, if you really got down on that bottom, and then if you sold at its all-time high right in February, you're sitting on a lot of cash if you were able to invest it. My money was tied in a GIC, and when I was so upset. I had most of my cash in a GIC the whole time when I watched the stock market tank, and I was like, thank God. And then I saw it rise. It's like, no, thank God, no. I want to get into the stock market now, but I didn't want to take the fee. But yeah, in general, the stock markets, if people take their money out and they start spending that into the real economy, that's when you're going to see a lot of inflation. Right now, the inflation's just been kind of stowed away in lumber, housing, collectibles. I mean, Pokemon. Like Magic the Gathering reserve list cards have been going up in value, but Pokemon, if you ever been keeping track of what's been happening there,
I hear about it.
It's
insane. And it's exactly that story that I was mentioning earlier. I think the first recipients of all this printed currency are the most highly valued assets. But
Yes,
the
yes.
people buying it can't be too over the top about it, right? Because if they go out there and tell the world, oh my gosh, you guys, like inflation's coming, go buy everything rare and then go buy farmland and then go buy, if they say that, then like game's over, everyone will run out and do it. So they go on news and they say, oh, it's fine, inflation's fine, we got this controlled. And in the meantime, they go back and say, hey, go buy 20 more shares, go buy that sealed Pokemon box, go buy that original art, things like that. And they're just kind of quietly taking things off the market, kind of as slowly as they can.
Yeah,
Right?
there's a lot of misdirection, especially if you watch any like Yahoo Finance or MSNBC. They always will kind of do a little slight misdirect where they will guide price predictors into a certain direction and then they'll actually buy something else. I
Yeah.
find like that's why I don't even pay attention. I don't pay attention to anything on the mainstream news when it comes to finances. I
Yeah.
just watch what the market's actually doing.
So, and it's the lies that bothers me the most, because in a free market, if you don't know what you're talking about and you go out and you arrogantly make a bunch of deals and get your butt handed to you, that's one thing. But when you go out and you lie to people and you manipulate these numbers, you manipulate the truth. Like, like you were saying, the CPI, total lie. Jobs number, it's a total lie, right?
Mhm.
The interest rates these days, because they're out there, buying the short end of the yield curve, artificially shoving their yield curve where they want it to be. So the yield curve is now a lie. So many things are just not true. And then you have these economists who go out and act like, oh, well, CPI is here. This that means the business is doing this, and they make all these comments and they pretend like these things are actual real numbers. And it's like it's all such BS. Like it just drives me crazy because if people don't understand what reality is, how are they ever supposed to invest well? And like my position right now, I think I have an idea where things are going, but the timing is critical, right?
Mhm.
Because the market can stay irrational a lot longer than you can stay solvent, right?
Solvent, yeah, that's
I
it.
actually started buying the VIX a while ago because like the
Made
VIX,
sense.
it surpassed its like 200 and 500-day moving averages. And I was like, wow, this thing is really low. Like even in the tiniest blip, right? Anything happens in the market and this VIX is going to like go 4 or 5x in like 2 days, right? And so I started buying the VIX, but then it's like I lost my butt on it because like then like the next thing you know, they're like, oh, they're going to do this stimulus, we're going to do this stimulus, and we're never going to raise interest rates. And they make all these promises and the VIX just kept going down. And so I actually had to pull out of that trade. I was buying call options that expire on the VIX in like June or something like that. And I bought them way under like market price, but they just kept falling. And that's the crazy thing, because when you have these people at the wheel that control like what's happening and they can cheat, fake the numbers, and they're the ones that decide when to let go of markets. They're the ones that decide when to do X or Y. And you have no idea when they're going to do it because they know when they're going to do it, but you and I don't know when they're going to do it. And even if you and I try to go into the market and trade, like I can see an asset at a certain price and I can put in a call, sorry, no, a limit price so I can purchase some calls or some puts or something. And then it's like my limit price will never get hit. I'll never purchase. So if I'll be like, okay, fine, I'll put in a market buy, right? And then it's like the thing's going at like $22 a share, $22 a share. And then I buy, and then it goes boom, $23 a share, and then back down to 22. And like I'm looking on a chart, and it's like it literally went up just at that second that I bought. So somebody front ran that trade, right? They went in and they shoved the price in a direction, and then my market price purchases at 23, and then it's back down at 22, and it hadn't been at 23 the whole day. It was sitting there at 22 flat, right? Then I do my big purchase, and all of a sudden it shoots up and then back down. And it's like I'm already underwater. I already lost like 5% on my trade. And so it's like the tools are all set up against us, right? And we don't have the inside line. Like, when is Jerome Powell going to hit the big red button, right? When is Germany going to change their direction? When is the IMF going to start like producing more SDRs and giving them to all these countries? Like, they know when they're going to do it, but you and I don't. And like they're the ones totally controlling and manipulating everything. So what do you do?
That you buy collectibles, you buy Black Lotuses.
Right? Like
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
literally sitting here, I'm shuffling like a whole Power
yeah.
9 set in my hand. Like I literally just bought another set.
Power
Literally.
nines.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, literally just bought a whole other set because I'm like, I don't know where to go with all these stocks and trades and stuff.
Yeah.
Even
I
if I
know.
identify for what's
I know
happening.
exactly how you feel because while like I diversify a bit, I have money in stocks. I still sit on I think too much cash, but I'm afraid to put it. Like I want to put it in more Magic the Gathering, but I feel like right now there so much all-time highs. It just feels like I know it's a good investment long term, but it doesn't feel good to buy at all-time highs. It never does. Even with the stock, you always
Right.
want to buy a dip or a
Yeah, you want to see
retracement.
a pullback. Yeah, a
Yeah.
consolidation phase and then be able to move in. And
And I
that's
think there might be, I'm hoping for when things open back up, um, there'll be a little bit more money going towards the more competitive formats, whether it's
yeah.
modern, standard, and then people will maybe sell some of their reserve list cards. Like I'm still looking to get a playset of each dual land. Uh, that has been on my radar for a while. So if I can actually get there, if there is a retracement, I'll be very happy because I feel like if inflation really is the direction where it looks like things are heading, and that is the way things are heading because it's not really hitting, fast food as much as it is hitting, commodities
Yeah.
like lumber or even collectibles,
Yeah.
then it's good to get in at some point. The problem is when do you get in?
I
That's
feel like my personal belief is we might be entering a small consolidation phase for revised cards, revised rares and stuff like that. And even some of the ones people have been speculating on. Like Rudy just did a video about like Wheel of Fortune pulling back and Copy Artifact pulling back a little bit. Now might not be a bad time to just go ahead and stretch and pick up those missing revised dual lands, because it might take a breath here and then just start running up again. That's my feeling, but I don't know. It's how do you say for sure? But that's what it feels like to me right now.
Yeah, I mean, if anything was going to definitely retrace first, it would be revised. It
Yeah.
was some of the most printed out of any of the older sets.
Oh yeah,
But
289,000 copies of each rare.
yeah, that's insane. I mean, well, dual lands are just always going to be good though to have. I don't know. I haven't really seen that many that much retracement in dual lands. I know when it comes to rares from revised, there's obviously ones that are going to be a bigger hit for retracement. Like dual lands are always going to be valuable, but yeah, if you've seen how much they were earlier in the pandemic in March compared
I was
to
watching.
now, like what is Underground Seas worth over $1,000 now?
So the possible retracement that I'm speaking about, I think it's coming. Because what you're seeing right now is the buy list prices are starting to drop with some of the stores.
Do you think it's because they just have gotten enough copies now that they
I
can
think that's
let it?
part of it. But
Yeah.
like, I mean, in order for a retracement to happen, it's always the same thing that has to happen. You need to start seeing inventory build. And so if inventory starts building up, you start seeing a lot of them on eBay because a lot of people start deciding like, this is where I'm comfortable selling. I've made enough profit. I'm checking out. And like you start seeing 10 and then 20 and then 100 underground seas on eBay, something like that. That's where
So it's like
is beginning. It's
the
forming.
volume, when the volume starts to form, and then
Right.
it's time to buy.
Yeah. Because like, it's a mix of buyers and sellers, right? Well, volume, you said volume because volume means executed trades. What
Mhm.
I'm saying is a buildup of sellers and not
Listings.
any equivalent amount of buyers. If you have another 100,000 sellers, but then another 100,000 buyers, your volume goes higher because those are executed trades, but the market price might stay the same if your buyers equals sellers. You need a lot more sellers to come out and not as many buyers. And you can have that at high volume and you can have that at low volume, but
Well,
that's what will drive prices higher.
I think when it comes to listing, someone could list it for whatever they want.
Sure. Yeah.
It's about like what's the market willing to pay for it. And I think there's going to be a certain point where people are listing these underground seas from revised just way too high, even for people who have a lot of liquidity. And they might just say, no, that's insane. I'm not paying that price.
Right.
And if we have enough of that, then I think we will see it soon. And I think you are right about the retracement for revised 100%. I think that's going
What
to
I'm
be the
saying is
first
just
set.
watch it. You start seeing them build up more and more of them online, then that price will probably start falling, and that's about the point to grab them. Is that's my opinion on it.
Well, another thing is because people aren't spending money. Like, what is the number one thing people spend money on? Travel. Like besides, like obviously mortgages, besides mortgages and everything else like that, or rent if you don't own a house. It's travel.
That used to
People
be a big one, not right now though.
Yeah, but even going out to like where I'm in Toronto, we now have. They just announced today we're actually having basically travel checkpoints now, where you're not going to be able to leave your own province.
Really?
Yeah.
Based on virus?
Well, yeah, police, yeah. So police are able to ask you where you're going on the streets, and you have to tell them your address and where you're going and what's the purpose of your travel. So people aren't going to be spending money in this type of economy. They're probably just going to be sitting on their cash. If you can't do anything with the money, you probably are looking to put it somewhere. And if banks give you such low return on your interest rates, whether it's a high interest savings account, whether it's a GIC, that's why I think one of the reasons the collectibles are going up is people are kind of afraid, well, where do I put my money? But also, you can't really spend it right now. And I think when people have opportunity, when the opportunity arises, I should say, to get back out there and start booking vacations, maybe people who like to go for a nice drink or two, some bars are very expensive. One night out at a bar, if you're paying for 2 meals and a few drinks, would cost you well over 100. So when people start spending money into the real economy that way, I feel like they may be willing to start selling their collectibles to get, lock in some of those profits and then use the rest of that money to either like book trips and plan something like a night out, like live your life. Like that's, well, you can fully live your life.
That might be. At the same time, if inflation is starting to rear its ugly head and the values of these, or the prices, I should say, of these items are skyrocketing, a lot of people will just hold them. Because it's like, why sell now? If I hold a little bit longer, the price goes up with it, right? So I don't know. It's tough to say because it's one of those things where there's so many variables and they're all moving at the same time and they all impact each other. It makes it very hard to predict, right? When you don't have stable currency, a whole lot of things go out the window. And we're looking right now at the market desperately needs deflation, but all these banks and governments won't let it happen. And so they're pushing inflation. And so you have this massive buildup of forces on each side. And now they're really combating each other. And it might go this way a little bit, then it goes this way a bit. How do you predict it? Because, we're not the ones on the steering wheel. We're not the ones controlling it. But what I can tell you is there's a lot of force on each side, right? There's a lot of people on the sidelines waiting to buy. There's a lot of cash that's been created. There's a lot of businesses that have been decimated, but then there's a lot of other markets that are taken off. It's so many variables that it's making it really hard to have any level of prediction.
Well, it's also making it hard to just find a safe haven for your money, somewhere safe. So, but what do you think? So we're still on the same topic, which is it's actually perfect because I think it all ties in really well with collectibles.
Yeah.
So you're saying we desperately need some form of stability in currency.
Well, in order for a society to survive and thrive, you need stability in currency. Yes.
Okay. So I'll give 2 options.
Sure.
So a digital currency or fiat currency tied back to gold.
Oh, that's there. This is a deep topic. We could do a whole video on this. So digital currency is way too general because digital currency could be many things. When you create a digital currency, I assume you're talking about a blockchain specific crypto type currency.
Let's say something like Bitcoin, but not quite Bitcoin.
Yeah. So the creator of that crypto can set up the crypto to be the way that they want it to be. They can adjust, what the benefit is for mining. They can adjust the maximum number of coins. They can adjust the difficulty. They can adjust the anonymity of it. There's so many factors that they can play with to try to make it good or bad. And all of those factors can have an impact on its growth and then the way it's going to work in the end. And so I don't think you can say digital currency and just leave it at that as if it's one thing, because I think you can make a digital currency that's terrible and you can make a digital currency that's fantastic. And I'll give you an example. Bitcoin is very specifically, it is the biggest. There is no question. It is the largest amount of excitement. The most investment is moving into it. But anyone who knows Bitcoin, the next things I'm going to say, if you really know the technology, you can't argue these points I'm going to make. Bitcoin is the literal Model T of the crypto world, is the first one created. It is the most technologically outdated. There's several technical problems with it that people don't understand actually exist. Like at this very moment, the blockchain size is like 337 gigabytes. It's massive. And that's a problem. That is a huge problem that people don't understand. The transaction time is like 10 minutes, whereas others are like 5 minutes, 2 minutes, something like that. The amount of power that the network consumes in order to process the currency is massive. There's a huge amount of speculators in it. And that's a problem because in order to be a currency, the value needs to be stable. And speculators buy something in order to gain value. They just want it to go up. And so the more people that speculate on it, pushing it up, the more it gains value, the worse of an actual currency it is. And so there's so much desire around Bitcoin for it to be a profit-making thing. It's annihilating all of its benefits as a currency. So you have all these problems around Bitcoin that actually exist and people don't understand. Now, you go to something like Ethereum. Ethereum has a much smaller blockchain, faster transaction, like verification time. It has like more features that goes along with like what you can use that actual blockchain for. It was developed after Bitcoin. Somebody looked, or various people looked at the actual source code for Bitcoin, fixed some of the problems, and then released Ethereum. It is a literal better technology, but it's not as popular. It doesn't have as many people going behind it, but it is actually more deserving of a top slot from a technological perspective, right? But it also suffers from all this like speculation and stuff like that. And so like you have these things that they're all cryptos, right? But based on the essence of how they're made, some are better, some are worse. But like to some extent right now, that all just kind of goes out the window, because I really want to stress this point so people understand it. So many people around the world, and when I say so many, I mean like 99% of those buying and investing and being excited about Bitcoin, they are not doing it because they want it to be a currency. They buy it to make money. And I'm not calling that evil, right? They're buying it. They want to make money. They are making money, right? But the process of them making money with it destroys its value as a currency. If a currency goes up in value, right, then like in purchasing power, you're not going to spend it. You're going to hold it because you want to be the guy that captures those gains. And so if you have a currency that's meant to help people do trade, but nobody trades because they just want to hold value, you have a tool that doesn't do its job. And so it's bad. If the currency goes the other direction and it goes down in value, that's a hyperinflationary event. You get rid of it as fast as you can. You don't want to hold it. The only way a currency does its job of being a currency is when the price value is stable. Bitcoin wasn't created in order to make nerds rich. That's not why it was made. It was made to circumvent central banking system in order to be a next world currency that we can all basically do free trade on the internet with each other and bypass all these a-holes in government trying to steal profit and control us. That's why it was made. But it's now been captured by a world of speculators trying to use it to gain value. And it's completely polluted its kind of purpose. And now if you start to ask the question about what actually starts, let me rephrase that. How have new currencies been successfully introduced into working economies? That's an interesting question, right? If you have an old currency and it needs to be done away with because there's various problems, and you have a new currency that people need to go to because it's better for various reasons, right? If you set up like a day or a time and you say, let's do an exchange one for the other. You're not going to gain or lose value. You're just going to go from the old to the new. You can make it a successful transition of currency. Then people can use that newer currency and have its benefits. That's one thing. And that's actually like more successful currency transitions have happened more like that. But if you have a currency transition that's different, like let's say, like Bitcoin is actually, it's a really good example of one that has a problem. If you have 1% of the nerds in the world, like you, me, other people that know about it, and we're holding on to this new currency, this Bitcoin, right? And the rest of the world, the 99% not us, is getting decimated. Their currency is getting destroyed and they really need to go to something else. Now, if that 99% of the world comes to the 1% and they all say, here is all of our wealth. This is our precious metals. This is our collectibles. This is our homes. This is our farmland. Here's our energy. And then that 1% of the world that had that Bitcoin gains all of the wealth of the world just so the rest of the world can have access to that currency and now do fair trade. What you've effectively done is you've made 1% of the world population insanely wealthy, rich at the expense of everything else. Mm-hmm. I would actually argue that's not a good currency. There wasn't a fair trade there wasn't a fair exchange of market values. It was a massive wealth transition that happened from like everybody to that small amount. And I don't think Bitcoiners think along those lines. So, but here's what that means though. If the rest of the world understands that and say you're a person who doesn't have Bitcoin and all these other people are getting rich, not because they didn't invent anything. They're not growing food. They're not creating energy. They're not providing a service or they're not providing items to the world. They were just an early person that bought this new cryptocurrency. And so is it even valid for them to now get all of the wealth of the world because they happened to buy it early? And so you're now going to get to use that currency because you're going to buy it from them, giving them everything you have. But now all the wealth you have is gone. There's a lot of reason why people around the world wouldn't like that trade. And so that's just, I'm not predicting how it's going to go. I'm just saying these are things to think about. Now that if you see that there's a problem there, an ethical problem there, then you see why there's people around the world that wouldn't want us to transition to Bitcoin. So now what would they ask their own governments to do? Well, I think they would go to their government and say, you know what? This whole Bitcoin thing, it's open source, guys. It's just a blockchain, right? Why are we going to have to go to Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the oldest, the most broken, Model T, terrible, lots of things. It's open source. Just go find the latest cryptocurrency open source out there, copy, paste, put your little name on it, have Congress pass a law that says this is now the new currency of the world, and do a fair exchange of you have this many dollars, it changes to this much crypto, boom. You, in that scenario I just described, you gain all of the technological benefits of crypto. You got off of the US dollar, you didn't give up your purchasing power for it, right? You didn't become, so meaning you didn't become broke at, just a couple people over here becoming like, incredibly wealthy, right? You get everybody on the same currency because you don't have this whole like competing, like, is it going to be Ripple? Is it going to be Dogecoin? Is it going to be Bitcoin? Is it going to be Ethereum? You now have a government coming out and saying this is the way. I think that's the way I think we could go to a cryptocurrency being a world currency, but I think it's more likely to be something like that. Like if a baker puts his cake recipe on the internet and he says, hey, everybody, like, here's my cake recipe. It's the best cake you've ever tried in the world. I'm giving it away for free. Now, everybody, like, don't make this cake. Every time you're going to make this cake, instead, just like look at the recipe, make it, and then pay me $10 for it. Like the world's not going to do it because like there's the cake, right? Well, you've effectively done that with like cryptocurrencies. Here's the open source code, right? Government just copy paste, makes it, does their own, and they are going to have, I think, the backing of the people in the world. Like if you were someone like your father spent his entire life working at a company, earning money, and all the assets that he has is things that he worked and he sweated blood and tears to get these things. But now he's got to give up all of his wealth just to some kid in Sunnyvale, California that bought Bitcoin before he did. Now the kid becomes rich and your family's entire estate goes out the window.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
No, I
When you
100%.
think about it, it really doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing with Bitcoin right now is it's more just treated as a storage of wealth. It's more like a stock, really. It's
I
not.
would call it a speculative asset, and that's not an
Yeah.
evil thing.
I mean, hey,
It's a
gold
very
can be
good
considered that.
speculative asset.
Yeah, gold can be considered that. It also can be considered a
It
storage
can.
of wealth.
It can.
I think the reason why people like Bitcoin so much is you were saying kind of open source, which is true, but it's also like decentralized. I think that's part of the reason why people like it so much.
That was
But
the original goal.
that was the goal. I don't think it'll ever be used as a world currency. I mean, it can be used as a world store of value for certain people, but
Right.
I don't see it ever being a currency. And that's why I was asking about, or do you think there should just be sound money pegged to gold so that it kind of protects people from inflation, which is obviously a massive issue right now. But
gold-backed currencies have their own problems as well. The US dollar was, in fact, a gold-backed currency. And like governments and corruption and banks slowly over the time of like 100 years broke us off of that. So you know what I think is the actual answer? Because that's where this discussion really goes. I think the actual answer to this entire thing is the world should go to a free market cryptocurrency backed by tangible assets that is not birthed into the world in order to make any specific group or government rich. It's birthed into the world as a replacement for tangible assets. And all of the countries and all the people and all the governments need to have like some form of agreement that this much of this crypto equals this much of this tangible asset. So basically, I'm proposing like a gold-backed crypto.
I was just gonna say that's exactly what I thought you were gonna suggest.
Yeah, so that's the way. But it's two things. It is that a crypto which benefits from being a crypto, backed by tangible assets, which is backed by the value of those assets. But then number three, and this is the thing people never talk about, it has to be introduced into the world in a way that's not going to make Group A rich at the expense of Group B. It needs to be introduced into the world into a way that it just does a conversion of money as seamless as possible.
So, well, see, that's gonna be the toughest part. Like, how do you seamlessly convert to a new currency? Yeah, well, you could technically, banks could ask for your, current US dollar notes and exchange those for the new currency. The problem is, if you were already got wealthy off of the old system, you're going to benefit from the new exchange. Right. So if they're going to do, let's say, a wipe the slate clean sort of deal where everyone gets the same amount of value for this new currency that they're creating, how would they implement that? That would be so difficult.
And see, that's you're asking the right question. And what I'm going to propose is there's things I can talk about on ways that this might come about.
Social credit score.
But here's the really important point. The really important point is that is the question. How does this get implemented? How do you roll it out? And the people that are currently those in power, meaning like governments and banks and like corporations and the existing rich people, how do you stop them from corrupting that rollout? Like that's, I have things that I think could be proposed as part of the answer, but I think the more important thing to grasp onto is like, number one, I think that is the answer. And number two, the existing question is how do you implement it? How do you roll it out? That's what has to be answered.
Well, they used to, in a sense, even if you think about credit cards, that like good credit was seen as like a form of, issuing you more like debt that you can use. Right. So it's like, you've been good. You've been paying your credit cards off. You have good credit and you'd have a higher credit score. Do you think that could be a new implemented system, some form of credit score involved?
Well, like if it depends on who's implementing it and by what rule set they go by. Like China right now is implementing a social credit system that is implemented by a government that cares about its own desires, not about the real wealth and freedom and liberty of its people. And since it's not being implemented by the right people, that social credit system, in my estimation, is evil. And I think it's going to be used against people in nefarious ways. And that doesn't even necessarily mean some form of system like that would be a terrible thing, but definitely done I'd say like just about any system implemented by corrupted people for their benefit and your loss is probably not a good thing.
Yeah. Well, it's also about if the people in power, if they have a certain perceived value of what is good, that might be inherently different to what you could argue is good behavior.
Right.
That's where it kind of skews. The problem is, where do we find like the moral compass when it comes to a real social credit score? Like, how do you truly know, hey, this person's a good person, a solid stand-up guy? How would you know that?
Who defines morality?
Yeah, that's where it goes down to the core of it.
Yeah, this whole fairness concept, true, is the same thing. Like, who defines fairness? Fairness is not such an easy concept to define. People think they understand fair, they really don't. Fairness is not easy. When if you really start digging down and start looking at examples, the world is not fair, man. I mean, people are born taller, shorter, fatter, thinner. Some are beautiful, some are not. Some are going to be born into rich families, some are not. I mean, the desire for fairness to some extent is born by jealousy and envy and covetousness that you can't, in an imperfect world, you can't completely cover that without implementing other systems that are unto themselves unfair. I think honestly, the only way to like come across that one is to just recognize that the world isn't fair. And the best thing that you can try to equalize isn't outcomes, but it's opportunity. You can only try to equalize opportunity.
I feel like that's what's kind of lacking in this world, though, is opportunity. I feel like especially the younger generations feel like they're getting less and less and less opportunity or a slice of the pie.
Yeah,
especially when it comes to real estate. Like Gen Z, I don't think there's going to be unless they just inherit real estate. I don't know how they're ever buying real estate.
And I think that's their most valid gripe, right? Because I mean, if a high school kid blows off all of his schoolwork, never does his homework, never tries, never gets involved in extracurricular activities, never learns any trade skills, never does anything, and then at 30 years old sits back and blames the world and whines because they're broke, I call BS on that, right? Because it's like, come on, man, you never did anything. But if that same person was never given the chance even to go to a good school, they were denied joining sports clubs, they were kept away from any kind of like training system that would teach them a usable skill, then you got a problem because they were denied opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the miss that happens in society these days. Everybody's looking at equalizing outcomes, and you can't look at equalizing outcomes because not only is the world different, we're all different, it's not fair, but then also people's effort and their talent and their commitment is all different. And that has to mean something, right? For somebody to actually try hard at something, that it actually has to mean something. So yeah, all you can equalize for is opportunity. That should be the goal, not outcomes.
Yeah, equal opportunity for everyone, I think, is the main outcome, that is the desired outcome, I should say.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely being born at the right place. Yeah, definitely being born at the right place at the right time has definitely some advantages.
It always has.
Like I'm assuming, are you Gen X?
Well, I'm 45.
Okay, so you were born in the era of Black Lotus. See, like when I was playing Magic, I didn't have the same opportunities of cards to purchase, right? So that could be but it
changes the map.
It definitely changes the map, but at the same time,
that's sold Power 9 like a lot of times. My first Power 9 set was in 1996, and Black Lotus, my first one I ever bought, was an unlimited Lotus in like 96 or 97 for like $200. This is only a couple years after the game came out, and it was already several $100s. Then
I wonder what that would be adjusted for inflation.
It's
still I mean, it's nowhere near as much as it is now.
Yeah, $200 item in 1996 and go to today, but it's gone way bigger.
$400 maybe.
But I actually sold that Lotus and then upgraded to a beta by like 1990, late 97, early 98. So I actually had a beta Lotus in college, but then I sold like all my cards at the end of college, and I had like beta Power 9, beta Dual Lands. I had all the big old vintage stuff. I had it, and I sold it all for $4,000 at the end of college in like the year 2000. And so I've been kind of going in and out of Magic over the years, but now I'm kind of buying and I'm like holding, and now I'm like, yeah, over my dead body, I'm going to sell again. But it did create an unfair advantage, because anyone who didn't have the means to purchase those types of cards at that time, and now they're coming into it, now they're looking at these huge prices. Yeah, it's a problem.
It's funny because that goes right back to what you were saying about that kid who has that Bitcoin and now he's got all this value. So it's always about the right place at the right time. It just depends on the assets.
Yeah.
And it depends on what you're interested in, right?
Yeah,
Like
there's
if you were
opportunity
interested in a
right
hobby
now.
that happened, yeah. Like, but if you're interested in a hobby that happened to gain a lot of wealth over the years, it's not really your fault. You just happen
Correct.
to enjoy the hobby and it paid
Correct.
in more than dividends over the
Right.
years. But I mean, you know what? Like I'm a little bit younger than you, so I had Pokemon. Like I was right there, first edition, Shadowless, Charizards. I've
Yeah.
passed through them all. I've bought and sold so many collections over the years, and now I can tell you I have a lot more Magic the Gathering cards than I do have Pokemon, which is interesting because that was a game I got into later on.
Uh-huh.
I didn't even get into Magic the Gathering until Return to Ravnica, believe it or not.
I've actually ran over the years, ran into a lot of people with your exact situation. And I don't mean this as an insult, so please don't take it as that. But Pokemon it was intentionally a more simple game
Oh yeah.
because it was targeting a different audience. And it makes sense to me that intelligent, good card players would eventually find themselves not as satisfied with a game like Pokemon and then discovering Magic, finding something that they felt was missing from that other card game. It makes sense in my mind because, I mean, it's correct me if I'm wrong. Please tell me. But my entire impression is the creation of Pokemon, it was after Magic, and they basically looked at Magic and said, that's way too complicated. Let's take a few sections out of this whole trading collectible card game thing. So it's a bit simpler, and let's give it cool animation. And we're targeting kids for this. It's meant for kids. Magic was actually meant for like college age people. It was meant for late teens, early 30s, Dungeons and Dragons kinds of nerds. That was their audience, right? Pokemon was meant for someone younger, but more simple. And I don't mean that as a knock because it's a way more popular game now. There's way more people that play it. But if you like the complexity, if you like the strategy, I think people would find themselves a lot less satisfied in a game like Pokemon than they would like Magic.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I have an interesting story. So my friend who actually taught me how to play Magic, it was around 2012, 2013. So around when Ravnica was in standard, he had a bunch of standard decks at his house. And at this time, I had a pretty formidable Pokemon card collection. And I had a ton of bulk that I didn't really know what to do with because I didn't really play Pokemon. I just kind of collected it. I feel like 90% of the people who have Pokemon card collections, it's not to play, it's just to collect. So I brought it over to his house one day
Yeah,
when
it
we're
does
already
seem
learning.
I think that's part of the reason.
That's exactly one of the reasons. It's a collectible, not so much of a game. But I brought over my bulk and I thought we'd make some decks because he was teaching me how to play Magic and I was really enjoying it. I couldn't believe how much fun I was having, just having a few beers and I'd be playing like a mono red haste deck. He would show me like a mono blue mill deck that he had and just learning all the colors and just having fun with that. I wanted to bring over my Pokemon cards and see if we can have a game and learn together because I never really learned how to play. So we went through the rules online. We got out a few cards that looked like they would have synergy. So we had the right energies with the right color of Pokemon, right elements, I should say. And we were playing, and after an hour, we were really trying our best. After an hour, we just looked at each other and said, yeah, this kind of sucks. Want to just play Magic? And then we just went back to Magic right after immediately.
Right.
And then the weirdest thing about that was after that, I actually had less of a desire to even collect Pokemon after because the game component was so poor and lacking. I mean, I still like kept a chunk of it, but all the bulk, I was like, I don't really need this. Like, I'm never gonna play with these ever. Yep. So that's when I actually got me more into Magic the Gathering. And obviously there's life cycles where you play a bit and then you get out of the game a bit and then you find out about a new set.
The nostalgia bug comes back and bites you. And you want to see it again.
Free time.
Not through that. Yeah, I've seen the story you just echoed. I've heard that in so many different ways over the years. So it totally rings true with me. Like, it's exactly the kind of thing I've heard. And it's an interesting thing when you think about the fact that let's just say Pokemon, and I don't mean this as an insult, it is a simpler game. It's intentionally a simpler game, right? Magic has that depth that people crave, and it is the original game But it's so interesting that Pokemon just destroys it in terms of popularity. And what an interesting thing about society that is, because it's the way it's introduced and the cartoons that went along with it and the excitement that's generated around it was such a different thing that the reality of what the two games were mattered less than the excitement and the commercialism and the everything else that happened around Pokemon.
I thought you were going to bring up the bell curve for a second, but yeah, no, totally. Like, no, I think it's just because it was marketed as a collectible and it had such a brand, the power behind Pokemon as a brand. I remember when Pokemon.
Yeah, kudos to them, by the way. They did a great job.
Oh, Magic can learn a few things from them for sure. Because when the actual English versions of the cards came in Canada, it probably came a year before in the States where you are, but the movie was already, I remember in the summer, it was like the movie was already planned to come out. And there was so much hype around this that it almost felt infectious. Everywhere I'd go at recess, there was someone with a binder of cards going through, doing trades. It completely wiped out Pogs within like a week. I remember everyone was playing Pogs. As soon as Pokemon became a thing, people got rid of their Pogs and went straight into Pokemon card collecting. And it was a 2-year thing. And I remember as soon as people, at least in my age group, when I was playing, it was about 10 to like 12 when I was collecting. Immediately, as soon as people like hit teenage years, that was like it. They just, there goes the garage sale. The mom sells all the Pokemon cards for $5, and then later on finds out.
Exactly the topic that I'm going to tie it back to cryptos. This is exactly the topic that concerns me for Bitcoin's future, because in my estimation, Bitcoin is not nearly as good a crypto as many of the other cryptos that are out there, but it's got the attention. It's got the FOMO. It's got the investment. It's got the news, and everyone's talking about it. But now let's imagine what happens after the craze. Let's say this whole craze happens. The market has a consolidation. It kind of settles out on a price for a while. And this whole promise has been that it's the new internet currency. Now people start actually using it as a currency. Now, if the investment side, the passion there goes away, and now people are trying to use it as a tool, well, now the technical issues that have existed there for a long time are going to start to matter. By that point, maybe the blockchain is like 900 gigabytes or something like that. Maybe the transaction like fees are large because nobody's mining anymore. So the just to process a Bitcoin goes up. And now, like, you've already got the thing of like, if you bought a Bitcoin at one price, you sell it another, you have a profit. And every time you have a profit, you owe taxes on it.
Oh yeah. They're doing that now. They're doing that now, by the way.
And so, now all these transactions, I mean, you buy a Coke. Okay, well, which Bitcoin did you buy with that one? Was that a Bitcoin you bought at 1,000 a coin? Was that a Bitcoin you bought at 50,000 a coin? What's your cost basis on it? So what's your profit on it? That honestly sounds like a mess. The point I'm making is once the investment FOMO craze goes away, and now the market tries to stabilize and people try to use it as the tool it was always intended to be, to do fair trade, that's when the technical problems that already exist are going to matter, and people are going to recognize it, right? And that's what makes me inherently fear for Bitcoin's value.
Well, right now the value is based solely off of the US dollar, right? Like, so like whenever it goes up in value, yes, there's people piling money in, but it's also it's going along with inflation as well.
Right.
So that's why
which is creating that FOMO story around it, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
So it's not yet in the phase I just described, like hitting the steady state. And then
it's not stable yet. I mean, it's more stable now in some ways than it was just before the pandemic. Right. I remember when it hit about 30,000, that was when it kind of got to the stabler phase, in my opinion, because everyone, they knew that was its previous ceiling. And it was like, oh boy, here we go. Everyone expected it to tank, and then it kind of stabilized, then started rising from there. But again, like you're still basing its value off of the US dollar. Like people are like, well, what's Bitcoin worth? And then you look, oh, it's worth 62,000 US dollars.
Right.
So that's how you're evaluating it.
So whatever you evaluate it off of, I mean, that could even change. You could evaluate it based on barrels of oil, acres of farmland, gold coins. You could evaluate it based on anything you want. The trick that I'm trying to be clear on is it doesn't matter what anyone says. It doesn't matter what any technology is. Nobody will ever get around this problem. The best currency in a society it must be stable. There is no way around that. If a currency value goes up, people react one way. Currency value goes down, they react the other way. In both of these ways, it ruins the ability of a currency to be a currency. The best currency, if you think about it, currency is not meant to be something that you buy and sell as its own investment. Currency is meant to facilitate trade for things that already exist. The best currency is not one where you're like, oh, if I don't spend this unit of currency on this thing, it's going to go up or down in value. You're not supposed to be thinking about the currency. You're supposed to be thinking like, I have a bunch of wheat that I can sell and I need to go buy barrels of oil. Or like, is the oil going to go up? Is the wheat going to go down? You want the currency to be stable. That is the goal. That is the thing you got to like watch, like the relative value of that currency going up or down. And once stability is achieved, that's when whatever the next currency is, Bitcoin or Ethereum or what's the IMF's one, the special drawing rights, the SDRs, it doesn't matter. Whatever a currency is, it has to be stable. And once that stability is hit, that's when you look at how good a currency is at being a currency. Does everybody accept it? Is it fungible? Can you easily make change? Is it easy to lose? Can it be stolen easily? Does it cost a lot to just to transact with, right? Is it difficult to transact with? All of those things matter, right?
I think the real question is, do we have enough beta lands to distribute to everyone as currency? That's a real question.
Definitely not. There's way too few. They're going to keep going up in value, I think, for sure.
Well, that's good because that would be money with real value to it then. It would go
Which
up.
makes it a fantastic investable asset and a terrible currency.
Yeah, that's true. Well, what you really want is deflationary money, right?
You want stability in a currency.
Yeah. Stability with deflationary, I think, is more stable than inflationary, though, money. It's like, because the point of capitalism is to find ways to get products as cheap as possible for consumers.
But separate those two concepts. Capitalism and the value of currency to some extent are mutually exclusive, right? The idea behind capitalism is you want competing entities to compete against each other to create a higher quality product at a lower price.
Lower cost, yeah.
Now that price could be, capitalism can happen in a stable currency economy. Capitalism can happen in an inflationary economy, and it can happen in a deflationary economy. But what I'm telling you is capitalism will, in fact, work best in a stable currency economy. When money is dependable and stable, the free market has less reason to hold back and more reason to just use it as a tool.
What do you think
that's really the key? Because if you think about inflationary or deflationary, it doesn't matter. On every transaction you do on something that is either deflationary or inflationary, somebody's losing and somebody's winning. Just think about that for a second. It doesn't matter which one it is. If you pick inflation, then the guy who's giving up the inflationary currency, he's getting rid of it. He's benefiting. The guy who's getting a currency that's being inflated is losing. If you go the other way, if it's a deflationary currency, the guy who's holding on to his currency is winning. The guy who's now cannot like buy something because this guy won't let go of the currency, he's the one who's losing because he doesn't have the currency. Inflation or deflation, either one creates winners and losers based on the currency entirely, which slows down trade. And capitalism requires free trade. Capitalism needs these entities to transact back and forth. So I'm sitting here telling you stability of currency is the best thing for capitalism.
And right now, we're living in very unstable times for currencies. But exactly. I think a healthy interest rate would definitely help. Problem is we've reached the point now where interest rates have been so low for so long that any sort of rise in interest rates will just cause a market panic. And some people don't actually associate the stock market too much of the real economy because they'll say, oh, well, we can't associate Wall Street with Main Street.
Yeah.
And that's true. But I can tell you right now, when a company's stock goes down, they look at their employees, their resources, to see if they can cut some of the fat, and then that actually
Sure.
is bad for the economy. Because when the stock market goes down, they're like, well, we need to have a little bit more liquidity to buy back our stock. Let's get rid of a few employees. So that's something people don't even think about. They're like, well, the stock market's not a thing, but it's unfortunately right now it plays a pretty big burden on society.
You made an interesting point there, talking about there is a good inflationary rate, and the topic there that I think people, I'm not saying you are, but a lot of people will miss is the rate of interest that you pay in something. There's a market feedback that's supposed to happen called price discovery. If you are paying a large amount of interest or you take a large amount of risk, there's supposed to be a cold chill that goes up your spine and you think, oh gosh, what happens if this doesn't work out, right? You're not supposed to have bailouts in capitalism. You're not supposed to have, people prevented from losing when unpredicted black swan events happen. There's the interest rates that get set are supposed to be based on the acceptable risk level of any individual when they look at losing their money and their investment, and they don't want that interest rate to go one way or the other. And so they choose amongst themselves where they want interest to be. And based on that is how they invest. And the people that take the most risk might possibly get the most benefit, but they also risk losing it the most. The reason why interest rates are so wacky today is because we have governments and central banks that won't let the free market be a free market. They won't let interest rates be determined by the free market. They're going in there and they're manipulating the federal funds rate and the bond market with the express intention of a bunch of eggheads in a room that think they know better than everyone else. They think that the interest rate should be at a certain point, and they try to make it be at that point. And I'll give you a really good example to make this point clear. The banking crisis happened. One of the major reasons is a bank wouldn't loan a person the money to buy a house, because a bank would look at a person and say, we don't think you have enough income. If we loan you a bunch of money based on these historical statistics, you're probably going to lose your job and we're going to be stuck. We're going to lose a bunch of money loaning you money. So yes, you'll pay us interest every month, but you're either going to have to pay us 20% interest or forget it. We're not going to loan you money. It's too risky. So the owners of the money would make their own decisions on who to loan to. But then some of the administrations, I think in the Clinton administration, and I'm not judging them, I'm just saying this is what happened. They decided that that wasn't very fair. They didn't like that. And so they forced banks to give loans to people that really weren't creditworthy. They didn't deserve to get those loans because they were too risky. Now, the bank loaning their own money, the bank would have just said, no, I'm not going to loan this person money. We have a lot of data, and the data says that this person is going to leave us high and dry. Yeah, no, thank you. We're not into losing our money. But then government and banks forced them to do it. Mm-hmm. And then since they were forced to make loans to these people, then when the defaults started coming in, the banks had a valid claim of dude, WTF, you made us loan all this money to all these people that weren't creditworthy. They did exactly what we thought they were going to do. They defaulted on their mortgages and we're losing our butts. And that's your fault because you made us loan them money. And so now the government was basically on the hook to do bailouts. So the real issue is that those in control didn't let the free market set prices based on risk, right? And based on gains and based on what you can actually lose. The free market was already picking its own prices, but they went in and they tried to manipulate that, and it caused unexpected consequences.
Well, on the flip side of that, in a way, that's created another housing crisis.
Yes.
Because now it's made it so difficult for people to qualify for a mortgage because of their decisions in the past.
Right.
I think now, what is it, a 20% down payment you need or 25% in some
On
places in
insane
Canada,
prices of real estate.
and already on insane prices.
Yes.
So like now to qualify, before it used to be one person's income could qualify for a mortgage for a house and you have a family. Then it's like two people with average incomes now have to qualify, and now it's like two people with above average incomes have to apply to be able to get a mortgage. At least in Toronto, where I am. Toronto, I don't know if you know Toronto housing prices.
I know they're high.
It's
I
close.
know when you go
average
to
price close to $2 million.
Rural, the prices are normal. When you go to the big cities, you're just getting destroyed.
Even in all of Ontario right now, housing prices, even like 3 hours outside of Toronto, houses will be listed for $400,000 and they'll be sold for $700,000 in a bidding war. Yeah, it's crazy.
But the key takeaway that I think everybody needs to understand, that people don't understand these days, is well-intentioned government and politicians didn't allow the free market to be a free market. They controlled the free market. They took control of it. And by doing so, they caused the housing crisis and now all these artificial bubbles and things like that. It's important because, like, if anyone actually understands what capitalism is, capitalism isn't a perfect solution. It does have its problems as well. It does. One of the ways capitalism can fail is when you have something called crony capitalism, where the people in power are picking winners and losers. They're doing bailouts. They're trying to force the free market into certain places. When these things happen, this is the key point. You don't have capitalism anymore. As soon as the government said, we're going to do bailouts, we're not going to let those who took unnecessary risk to eat the losses. We're going to run into the market and shove things a certain way. We're going to print money. We're going to do bailouts. Capitalism died. It doesn't exist anymore. You do not have bailouts in capitalism. You don't have fixed interest rates in capitalism. All of these things shouldn't even be in there at all. And now it's causing unintended consequences like crazy.
Well, there's a bit of crony capitalism going on right now when it comes to picking winners and losers with the electric vehicles versus gas.
Oh, absolutely.
Right 100%.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's true. I mean, that's not even something is up for debate, unfortunately.
I agree. They shouldn't be doing it. They should just let the free market do it. And once electric cars are cheap enough and
that's
enough,
exactly what it is.
People will run in and buy it.
Because people who don't have the income can't afford to buy an electric vehicle. So their cheaper alternative would be to buy gas vehicles, but then they raise the cost of gas and then poor people are riding bikes.
It's unintended consequences. Well-intentioned politicians, like that's what I was saying. They're not the evil guy twizzling their beard being like, I'm going to destroy the economy. They think they're helping. But the best way to help a free society is what the original, I would say, founding fathers of America said. Government's role is not to be big and strong and oppressive. Government's role is to trust bust. It's to break up big corporations. It's to stop monopolies, right? Like, if you think about it, there's an awful lot of things out there like Google. Dude, it's a straight up monopoly. Hands down, absolutely. It's a monopoly. Apple itself is nearly a monopoly. Facebook is to some extent a monopoly. YouTube to some extent is a monopoly. Like, the old framers of the Constitution in America would view those as too big, too powerful, too much control. And their job wouldn't be to partner with them and make a ton of money. Their job would be to go in there and crack them all up and make YouTube have split into like 5 companies. And they all have to compete with each other, right? With thus bringing the price down. Now, if like YouTube A abuses people, the people are just going to go to YouTube B, right? So you can't have one group just decide they're going to shadow ban someone or knock them out. That's what government used to do. Like, their role used to be almost the antithesis of corporations and business. Corporations and business would fear them because they would run in and break them up if they got too strong and too controlling. Now these days, they're all in bed with each other. I mean, you watch bankers go from like Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan Chase into the CFTC, and now they're going to work in government, like regulating trade and stuff. And then they go right back and work for Goldman Sachs again. It's like, hold on, man. You that was like, a fox putting a sheep's clothing on and hanging out with the sheep for a while, and then going back with the fox pack. It's just these are the natural enemies, and they're now moving freely back and forth with each other. It's like, that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. What I will say is we have went for over an hour. Wow. So far, this is the longest I've ever went on the Mattcast. It was amazing to talk with you, Edwin. I wish we could have talked a little bit more about Magic, but maybe we can always reschedule something for later.
Yeah.
But either way, I had a great conversation. It's always fun to talk about economics with people who love collectibles as much as I do. So
Yeah,
thanks so
it's
much.
interesting how collectibles and economics cross, and
They
people that
always,
love both, really good conversations. I agree on my side. It was great talking to you.
yeah, thank you. Well, and everyone can find you on Unhinged Magi or Edwin the Magic Engineer on YouTube, and you could find him and Open Boosters on there, and they crack packs. They talk about MTG finance, and they talk about the game we all love. So thank you so much, Edwin, again, and we will chat again real soon. Take care.
Okay, thanks a lot, Matt. You have a great day.
You
Bye,
too.
everybody.
Being a patron will help me produce more market movers and add to the funds that I will use for my random buys and also to my coffee fund because I drink a lot of coffee for these videos. And here you can see a link below in the description that will give you all the tiers and what you get in each tier. So I hope you guys click and think about joining. And with that, I'll see you next video. Think about supporting the channel in that way. If not, subscribe, like, leave a comment, and I will see you again in the next video.